Hello class. Our today's topic is population attribute and growth models. Uh, a population has certain attribute that an individual organism does not possess. So population attribute in nature we rarely find that the isolated single individuals of any species. Majority of them live in groups in a well defined geographical area also, and its shares are complete for the similar resources. So potentially interbreed, and thus they constitute the population. So these are known as the population, and population ecology is therefore an important area of that ecology because it links the ecology to population genetics and evolution also. The population attributes are the following that are very important characteristic of any particular population. Number one thing is the birth rate and death rate, and second is the sex ratio. Third is reason is the population age. What is the age of that particular population in population attribute, and what about the population density also means the population size. What type of the population size over here? So first is the death rate and birth rate. Birth rate and death rate. A population has certain attribute that an individual organism does not. An individual may having birth and death also, but a population has birth rate and death rate. In a population, these rates refer to a per capita birth and death respectively. So this can be illustrated by some example that if a pond there are 20 lotus plant last year, and through the reproduction 8 new plants are added, taking the current population to 28. So we calculate the birth rate as 8 by 20 is equal to 0.4 offspring per lotus per year. Thus, the birth rate can be calculated by this following formula, like birth rate is equal to an upon nm. So, what is this an? What is this an? That is the delta n upon. Similarly, we can know that the n delta t means similarly we can understand the death rate also by taking an example. If 4 individual in a laboratory population of 40 fruit fly suppose that dies during a specified time interval, says in a week, the death rate in this populations during this period is 4 by 40, means 0.1 individual per fruit fly per week. So this is the ratio basically. We know that this is the death rate and birth rate. Second thing is the sex ratio. Another that attribute characteristics of a population is sex ratio. So an individual is either a male or a female, but a population have a sex ratio. That is, a population have both males and females. For example, if in a population of 1000 individual, the 600 individuals are female and rest of them are males, then there is 60-40 ratio for the female to males. So this is the ratio. Third one is the population age. A population at any given time is composed of an individual of different age, pre-reproductive, reproductive, and post-reproductive. There is a 3 stage of this population age. An age pyramid in a graphic representation of proportion of various age group of a population of human, like the age pyramids generally shows the age distribution of males and females in a combined diagram. The shape of this pyramid reflects the growth status of this population. So we know that there are 3 types of this age pyramids is there. In one condition there is a triangular, there is a bell shape, then third is the urn shape. Means whether the population is growing, whether the population is stable, and whether the population is declining. So we have to study by these things this population age in a given particular population area. In this picture you can see here one first diagram is the expanding, the population is expanding in this growing, means you can see in this graphic representation the growing population in which appears in a triangle like structure. And second is that is the bell shape, the pyramid is bell like, pre-reproductive individual being only marginal, that is the only marginal more than the reproductive individual. So this population is said to be a mature, or sometimes it is known as a stable, as there is no increase and not decrease, and the size due to growth rate being almost zero. Third, in the third diagram you can see this is the U urn shape, URN, urn shape. It has a small number of pre-reproductive individual followed by a large number of reproductive individual. We can say this is decline growth, sometimes it is a negative growth there. Now the fourth thing is the population density, or we can denote it by the capital N, or know that it is a population size. So this the size of the population tells us a lot about its status in the habitat. Change in population size is used to evaluate various ecological processes, like outcome of competition of members of one species with another species, the impact of a predator, or the effect of a pesticides application. So population size of an given area or space is known by the several way, like total number, to know what is the total number, total number means the counting all the individual of the space. The size of population in nature could be low, or sometimes the like Siberian cranes of Bharatpur wetland in an year, it or it goes into the sometimes millions, like in the ponds, Chlamydomonas in the ponds. So total number of this population density. Second thing is the biomass, or we can see it is an percent cover also. And third is the relatively density. Relatively density of any species is the total number of individual of a species is divided by the total number of individual of all species, and it is then multiplied by the 100. So next is the indirect count. Population size measurement can also be carried out indirectly without actually counting or seeing the organisms. For example, the tiger census in the national park and the tiger reserve in India is often based on the that pug mark, and sometimes in the fecal pellets also. So this is the method, that is the indirect count also. Now, what is the population growth? Actually, the size of a population for any species is not a static parameter, but it is ever changing depending upon that various factors, including pound availability, food availability, what is the availability of the food, what is the predation's pressure, and what are the adverse weather effect. This fluctuation in population size gives some idea of what is happening in this population, whether it is flourishing or whether the population is going or to the decline areas, means decline. The density of a population in a given habitat during a given period, it fluctuates due to the changes in the four basic process, that we know that two of which known as the natality and immigration, and it contribute to increase in the population density, and two regions, that is the mortality and immigration, that leads to a decrease population growth. So natality is referred to the number of birth during the given period and in the population that are added to the initial density, and mortality is the number of death in the population during a given period. And such like that is the immigration, and it is the number of individual of same species that come into the habitat from elsewhere during the time period over consideration. This may help to speed up the growth of the, to prevent the extension of smaller population like in plants, and it is equivalent to known as the disseminates. So population growth is totally depend upon the natality, mortality, immigration and immigration. So by with the help of all these four regions, we make a growth model also, or we can go to make a formula for the growth of that particular area, like if the migration is there, B, capital B, the number of birth, D denotes for the number of death, I the number of immigrants, and E for the number of immigrants also. So this is the denoted symbols, and for based on these all these four things we can describe the growth model. It represents the specific pattern of the population growth. So we can see the growth models are the pattern of population growth, and there are two that pattern of growth and can be explained that depending upon the impact of this environmental factors. One is the exponential growth, another is the logistic growth. Now, exponential growth, also called as geometrical fashion of growth, occurs when the resources, means food and space, are limited. And according to the Darwin, when resources in the habitat are unlimited, each species has the ability to release the fully its innate potential to grow in a number. This intrinsic rate of natural increase is called as a biotic potential also, and it is denoted by the small r. The value of small r is an important parameter to assess the impact of environmental factors on population growth. And the important speed of this exponential growth means as increase or decrease in population is denoted by the capital N during a time t, that dn upon dt is equal to b minus t into n, where small b is known as per capita birth rate and small d is per capita death rate. So if b means if birth capita rate is minus to the per capita death rate, that is equal to r, means that growth, exponential growth. And then we note that the dn upon dt is equal to rn. This is the formula. So there the r in this reaction is called this intrinsic rate of natural increase, and it is very important parameter that is chosen for the assessing impact of any biotic or abiotic factor on any population growth. So any species that growing exponentially under the unlimited resources, that conditions can reach enormous population density in a very short time. This magnitude is of r was near about, it is the value. What is this value? Equation in the equation dn upon dt is equal to rn, that describe the geometrically growth resulting that curve is near about the G-shape curve. So in the exponential growth we find that the G-shape curve, and this G-shape curve and such population stop abruptly due to the environmental assistant, which becomes effectively suddenly, or our resources maybe becomes the depletion, so decline in the J-shape. So it comes down to the J-shape, and population intensity that trigger by this method of the algal bloom sometimes in the pond area, and insect population suddenly increases in any population's growth. So this population growth curve is found that in the J-shape in the exponential growth. This above parameter, when the above equations describe this exponential or geometrical growth of any patterns, we find that result is a J-shaped curve, and we plot this n in relation to the time. If you are familiar with the basics calculus, you can derive the integral forms of the exponential growth equation as nt is equal to no ert ns, where this nt is equal to population density over the time t, and no the population density the time 0. So r is the eccentric rate of the natural increase, and this basic natural logarithm according to the log table, this value of this intrinsic rate r is equal to 2.71828. It is the value. This value have to put in any formula to know the exponential population growth. This is the exponential population growth. You find here a J-shaped structure is there in the exponential growth model. The another growth model is known as the logistic growth. So logistic, what is this logistic growth? Actually is describe a situation in which the resources present in the environments are very very limited. Means in nature a given habitat has enough resources to support a maximum possible number beyond which no further growth is possible. This natural limit for this species is that habitat is called the carrying capacity actually. So every particular area there is a carrying capacity, means it is denoted by the capital key. Thus the nature does not dispose or provide unlimited resources availability to permit the exponential growth to the population of any species. This factor actually comparisons between the individual for a limited resources, and hence the fittest individual will survive and reproduce. That is totally based on the Darwin's law. And the sum of these environmental factors thus limit the population size is called the environmental resistant, and environmental resistant rises with the rise in the population size also. The influence of environmental resistant over the biotic potential, that is totally generated by this formula, over a biotic component denoted by, that is a dn upon d2 is equal to rn, and k minus n is divided by the k, where the k is the carrying capacity, the capacity of that particular population area, where n is the population density at a time and r is the intrinsic factor and k is the carrying capacity. Since resources for the growth for most animal populations are finite and become limiting sooner or later, so this logistic growth model is considered to be a more realistic one. Reason is behind that. And such a population growth is represented by a sigmoid curve, a shape curve, and a population growing in a habitat with limited resources. So that's initially a lag phase, followed by this phases of acceleration, and then declaration, and finally as asymptote when the population density reaches the carrying capacity. So when this is going to be carrying capacity is going to be stable or stagnant. So this curve is just like an S-shaped curve, and it is very very important for this, since the resources of this, we know that animal populations are very finite, so it is more realistic. So logistic growth is more realistic than the exponential growth. This is the picture which comes, and you can see here the carrying capacity k. This is the capacity of this shape, the exponential at that portions, and then decline. So in the next topic we will take the interactions of different population with each other in the environment. Thank you and have a nice day.